GitHub Actions. So in in GitHub portal, right, when you're using the GitHub cloud platform, we can create workflow even in GitHub itself. If there is some project which is to be executed and deployed, we can even do some basic checkings or testing in the GitHub itself using GitHub Actions, right. So if you log in into Git and see, you can find the GitHub Actions in the repository. Whatever repository you are having, you can find the GitHub Actions there. So basically it's a built-in CI/CD tool inside the GitHub, okay, which can automatically help us in building or giving us the build or run some test and deploy the applications, right. So let's understand about this GitHub Actions, right. So GitHub Actions is a continuous integration and continuous delivery platform. It's a CI/CD platform, right. So within, see, we are saying that Jenkins is the CI/CD platform, but some of the features or some of the characteristics of Jenkins or some of the tasks which Jenkins does can also be achieved using GitHub Actions, right. It's a platform that allows you to automate your build, test and deployment pipeline. This can be done even in GitHub itself, right. So you can create workflows that build and test every pull request to your repository or deploy merged pull request to production. See, in the demonstration we have seen that continuously the collaborator or the owner of the project or the repository is getting pull request, right. So whenever we are accepting the pull request, you can include that and construct a build or make a build for us for deployment, right. So GitHub Actions go beyond just DevOps and lets you run workflows when other event happens in your repository. Okay, so we are saying that in Jenkins we can create pipeline. That pipeline will take care automatically, testing, deploying, everything will taken care. Same kind of similar workflows can be created in GitHub using GitHub Actions. Okay, so that's what if you see the screenshot here, right. If you see this is the screenshot from my GitHub page, right. So I had one repository LPU collab, and in that you can see this tab. See here, when there is code, issues and pull request, and here you can see there is actions, right. So using actions we can create workflows. So if you click on actions, it will show you all workflows. There is one workflow here. Okay, you can create a new workflow and which will automatically give a build and also do some basic testing. It will run some tests, basic checks will be done here, right. This is what Jenkins is doing, or the difference between GitHub and Jenkins is that GitHub Actions is for small projects or for small changes, whereas Jenkins is for enterprise level projects, which means huge projects. When there are big projects, multiple number of services, more number of people involved, then we will go for Jenkins, right. So some companies for small projects, like we as developers, if we are designing our own website, okay, then we may use GitHub Actions because it is within our control and we can do it easily, right. So this is the tab here, Actions. Once you click, you can create new workflow, right. So what are the different components of GitHub Actions, right. What all things are involved, or what are the different components in the GitHub Actions, right. So you can configure a GitHub Actions workflow. Here if you see, I have the option of creating a workflow, right. So we can configure a GitHub Actions workflow to be triggered. One workflow should be automatically triggered when an event occurs in your repository. What is the event? Adding some file or deleting some file, updating some file. If you are doing some change in your repository, automatically an event can be triggered. Okay, a workflow can be triggered when an event occurs, some change occurs, such as a pull request being opened or an issue being created. Whatever change you are doing in the GitHub, right, automatically a workflow is triggered based on that. And your workflow contains one or more jobs which can run in sequential order or in parallel. What are the different jobs? Jobs can be I can build, okay, give me construct a build for me, or run some basic check. All that can be jobs. So a workflow contains one or more jobs which can run either in sequential order or parallel order. Now in each job will run inside its own virtual machine runner. Okay, each job will run in its own virtual machine runner or inside a container depending on the project, and has one or more steps that either run a script that you define or run an action, which is a reusable extension that can be simplify your workflow. Okay, so there are so many terms here. The components of GitHub Actions. The first component is workflow. It's a sequence of steps which can be triggered when an event occurs. So the next component is an event. What is an event? Event could be such as a pull request being opened or an issue being created. Now each workflow contains one or more jobs. Okay, now each job will run in its own virtual machine runner. So there is something called a runner. Okay, and it has one or more steps. The job will have one or more steps to be performed. That steps could be either run some script or run an action. What is an action? Which is a reusable extension that can simplify our workflow. Right? So here an event is happening, because of that this is the workflow. In that an event occurs, after that in one runner, right, there is one job happening. A job can have multiple steps. Right. So this is the runner. Inside runner I have one job. In that there are so many steps. That steps could be either execute a script or run an action. See, run action, run script, run action. Like that I can have another runner. That also can contain different jobs, and that job will have different steps. So this is basically the components of GitHub action. Okay, so the main thing is workflow. In workflow will be triggered based on an action. Workflow contains lot of jobs. Each job runs in its own runner, and each job has multiple steps. That steps could be either run a script or run an action. Right? So these are the different components of GitHub Actions. Now let's understand in detail what is an event, what is a job, what is a runner, what is an action in detail. Let's try to understand them. The first one is workflow. Right? So a workflow is a configurable automated process that will run one or more jobs. Like this, it can run as many jobs as possible. Job 1, job 3, anything you can give there, automatically it can happen. So basically, if you remember, the pipeline, CI/CD pipeline contains, the first step is to build, then to run test, okay, then to move to staging, then advanced testing. So these are all different jobs. Building is one job, running test is another job, moving to staging is another job, and each job will have multiple steps to be done. Right? So workflow is a configurable automated process that will run one or more jobs. Workflows are defined by a YAML. Okay, yet another markup language, YAML file, checked into your repository and will run automatically when triggered by an event in your repository. So there will be a code written. Actually, how is that trigger? How is that triggering happening? There is one YAML file which will contain the script, which will contain the instructions to trigger. Okay, or they can be triggered manually or at a defined schedule. So this YAML file will contain all the instructions to trigger a workflow. Okay, so workflows are defined in .github/workflows directory. So in the repository we have a workflows here. Right, if you go in this, you can find all these workflows. If you click, you can see all the workflows like this. I have only one workflow here, but all the workflows will be visible to you in this folder, .github/workflow. Right? A repository can have multiple workflows. Each of them can perform a different set of tasks. So here I can have multiple workflows. One for the same project, I may have multiple workflows, each one for different task. Right? For suppose one task could be building and testing pull request. The other task could be deploying your application every time a release is created. The other task could be adding a label whenever an issue is opened. So it could be any task, right? So there could be multiple pipelines running, multiple workflows running at a time for a given single project. Okay, the first component is workflows. The second component is events. What is an event? Event is a specific activity in a repository that triggers a workflow. So some action, something should change in the repository such that an event can occur. When an event happens, the workflow is triggered, right? For example, an activity can originate from GitHub when someone creates a pull request or pushes a commit to the repository. There is a pull request or there is a push or a commit is there in the repository. It's an event. We call it as an event because some change has happened in the repository. Any change what happens in the repository is an event, right? You can also trigger a workflow to run on a schedule by posting a REST API or manually. Even the events or the workflow can be triggered based on a scheduled time. We can fix that also. Every day at 4 a.m. please run this script and trigger a workflow. That is also possible, right? Then the next component of GitHub Actions is jobs, right? So we know that each workflow contains multiple jobs, right? Each workflow contains multiple jobs. What is a job? It contains lot of steps. If you see here, right? Each workflow contains multiple jobs. Each job can have multiple steps, right? So a job is a set of steps in a workflow that is executed on the same runner. Runner means a virtual machine, basically a virtual machine. Each step is either a shell script to be executed or an action that will run. Okay, steps are executed in order and are dependent on each other. So one after the other only I will be doing it. One step, then second step, then third step, right? So each step could be either executing a shell script or executing an action. Since each step is executed on the same runner, you can share data from one step to the another like this. See, I will have here, I have step number 1, run action, step number 2, run script, run action. So it is done in sequence. So data sharing is also possible, right? For example, you can have a step that builds your application followed by a step that tests your application. So build and test together can happen in a single job, which all can be contained or executed in a single virtual machine runner. Then we have something called as actions. What is an action? Action is a predefined reusable set of jobs or code that performs specific tasks within a workflow, right? So I can execute, if I just go back here, right? Each job will run in a runner and each job has multiple steps. In that step could be either run a script or run an action. So what is this action, right? So it's a predefined reusable set of jobs or code that performs specific tasks within a workflow, reducing the amount of repetitive code you write in the workflow files. Some actions can perform tasks such as pulling your Git repository from GitHub. This is an action. Setting up the correct tool chain for your build environment. Setting up authentication for your cloud provider, right? Like this, there could be n number of actions. Either you will execute some script or you will perform some action, right? So this is another component what we have. Then we have something called as runners. What is a runner? It's a virtual machine basically. Runner is a server that runs your workflow when they are triggered. A runner can run a single job at a time. So GitHub provides Ubuntu Linux, Microsoft Windows and Mac OS runners to run your workflows. So all kinds of operating system it supports, right? So each workflow run executes in a fresh newly provisioned virtual machine. Every time you are executing a workflow, every time there is some job to be done, each job will execute in a runner or a virtual machine runner, right? That will be a new setup. Always it is a fresh virtual machine which is created, right. So that is about the runner, right. So these are different components in GitHub Actions. Okay, what's a GitHub action? It's a CI/CD platform that allows you to automate your build, test and deployment pipeline. So it looks something like this, right. It has different components. There is something GitHub Actions workflow is there, and workflow is triggered when an event occurs, and workflow contains one or more jobs. Each job will run in a runner, and each job has lot of steps, and each step could be either running a script or running an action, right. So this is the whole story about GitHub action. So in GitHub, when you write some project, when you write some code and you want to do small changes, you want to execute and check, do some basic testing and build, construct construct a build that can be done using GitHub Actions itself. The important point here is, what is the difference between Jenkins and GitHub Actions, right. Jenkins is basically for bigger projects, whereas GitHub is for smaller projects. Okay, Jenkins is a separate server actually, whereas GitHub GitHub is hosted in the GitHub itself. GitHub action is one strategy which is there in the GitHub platform itself, right. So GitHub can replace Jenkins, or Jenkins can be replaced by GitHub. Both can be used. Only thing, Jenkins is very popular because it supports lot number of plugins, additional plugins, right. So this is about the GitHub Actions.